complete rubbish.
Hi, my name is Custodis. I'm a musicologist at the University of Münster, and I'm here in Tampere in Finland, where Steve Vai is recording his orchestral music. I had the pleasure of visiting him in the studio, and I could experience a very different Steve Vai, the composer. So now I try to explain the procedures and the interaction during the recording sessions. The special occasion and the theme of this video simply is: how does a sound vision turn into a performance? Usually we think of orchestras something like a huge machine, like Charles Chaplin in modern times, where a lot of parts somehow are interacting and there is one idea that keeps it all together. This is not somehow true for what we'll experience now. It's not really like a machine where one singular idea designs the mechanics that simply produce exactly what somehow the duties demand. What will we experience instead is, first of all, the composer, Steve. He had an idea in his mind and tried to pin it in a score. The piece we'll discuss is The Still Small Voice. We'll come back to that in a minute. But what you'll also experience is Steve, not the performer we all love on stage with the flying fingers and everything. We'll experience a very silent Steve the listener. That doesn't mean that he doesn't do anything. Instead, he does quite a lot because he takes care, he pays attention, he focuses extremely on what he reads here in the paper and what his ears tell him what happens with the orchestra. What we'll also experience, Jukka, the conductor, was connected, so he was the one understanding both the compositional imagination of Steve, but also the flux, the interaction within the orchestra, trying to bring it all together. Then you will hear snippets of dozens of musicians, 80 and more, of individuals in the orchestra forming one unity while maintaining their personal input. So we have a collective of singularities. Sometimes it's important that we have singular voices, and sometimes it's important that we have a strong tutti sound. And you'll also recognize how important Joris, the recording engineer, the technician, is, because he also was reading the score and he was taking care of Pro Tools, so he had both the musical and the technical point of view. Imagine what we'll see now. Imagine a huge puzzle. We can see Steve and the musicians working on details. And for us, it's a little bit difficult to explain now because I had the pleasure of listening to the piece in its entirety. At the end of the recording session, we had one performance where it's more something like 25 minutes of music, and we could listen somewhat to the full perfect piece. In the recording session, we had certain phrases, we had certain bars where the recording stopped and where the details need to be changed and crafted. And the interesting thing is, usually those details remain unclear without the score, but also the details remain unclear. What does a single note in the flute or in the timpani really change? And what we'll recognize is when Steve discusses with the musicians a little different pronunciation here, a little different dynamics there, changes the whole setting of the actual passage that was recorded. Because this score here is a multiverse of details. The main parameters are set. We have the different voices and the dynamics and the expression, but it needs to be defined before somehow you get into the studio and have the rehearsals with the orchestra. But also Steve needed to really take care that everything he imagined had to be as precise as possible in the score, and then the rehearsing can start to somehow bring that into life. The sum, interestingly, is of course more than its parts, because the orchestra is one breathing organism of collaborating individuals, somehow that bring this piece, the still small voice, to life. If you had a listen, the interviews that I could record with Steve, there he described the idea of the still small voice. Let me summarize that with a few words. First of all, as you can see on the title page, it's the second part of The Middle of Everywhere. The Middle of Everywhere is a huge piece of music with certain movements, with singing, solo guitar, roaring orchestra, so everything you can expect from Steve. The second part here is somehow a comment on the first part, so that the piece can be performed as a singular piece, but also as the second part, somehow as the answer to a question that The Middle of Everywhere was raising. And here we have, and that's very difficult to imagine, when we have a look at the score, you only hear a few intervals, how Steve starts a guitar part. Steve sang that part in the second interview we documented, and then this long note will last for more than 20 minutes, which is spectacular because usually we see Steve with his flying fingers. Here he's holding one note all the time, but then the orchestra starts to develop a lot of different voices, threads, aspects, counterparts, but also reacting parts, all around this note. This guitar note somehow is the red line that keeps the whole piece together, and in between the orchestra is weaving around it like an organism. And the further we get in the score, the more happens. We have silent parts, we have strong parts, very noisy parts, and that's somehow the magic of this piece. You have this somehow very stable moment of Steve's performance, keeping it all together, with his somehow statue on stage, where he only holds this one note, but somehow this focus keeps the whole piece together with a gigantic, very strong ending. Let's get into the first chapter of what I somehow could follow in the studio. The first things were very basics: rehearsing, correcting errors, and defining details of intonation and dynamics. What we'll see here in the first take is everybody had to get used to routines. So we had small segments that were recorded bar by bar, passage by passage, until Steve and the musicians and the conductor were somehow happy with what they heard. So let's take a look.
Seems to be the most difficult part of anything we've tried to record.
Yeah.
Can we take another look?
The next passage was the continuation of the one before, but interestingly, there was something not wrong, but not appropriate. And then Jukka and Steve and Joris had a very smart idea. They reduced the tempo. This is a very special moment because usually we just listen directly in time, and that was more the idea of something like listening in slow motion, because we could get into the anatomy of a breathing organism where everything that happened within a few seconds all of a sudden had more time to develop, so you could isolate this certain element that wasn't somehow matching with all the others, and all of a sudden, like with an acoustic microscope, through this different view, they all brought this puzzle back together, and you could hear directly the difference.
Oh, it's so lovely that we have telepathy. Can we practice it one time a little slower?
I think it would work better if everybody can kind of hear where the rhythms fall slower.
Yeah.
The next example I can show you is somewhat a variation of what we just saw, that changing minor elements changes the surface of the piece, in this case with the timpani.
Actually, if the timpani can give us a roll up to the F, if that's possible.
But then 4/4 is forte.
No.
Double forte with a roll grace notes into it. That's it, but the downbeat should have a little more of an accent.
Ota. Now comes to option 1. Or fill it up. Like that, or bump. Fill it up.
Option 1, same note.
Separated, right? The endings.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Nice timpani. Okay, we'll try that when we get back.
Yeah.
The second chapter is how to communicate imagined sound. So we try to get deeper and deeper in all the different aspects. One aspect was tempo, the second was phrasing, and the third one is expression. A little earlier I had somehow this metaphor of microscopic hearing, which sounds a little different or a little strange, but just imagine that your ear can listen very precisely and isolate through a different some noise and focus only one line or one melody instrument. This helped very much in the studio setting because we again had situations of something like a time stretch with reduced tempo, and we could learn about the importance of dynamics because certain elements, certain details needed a different highlighting so that it all somehow could be puzzled back together with different nuances. Usually, Steve would organize, as we somehow know from his work with his rock records, on a mixing console, where somehow the complex abilities of the musicians are combined with the sound engineering. With the orchestra, it's different, because an orchestra is a very, very complex organism, and all the changes needed to be done directly during the rehearsals, because changing different dynamics with certain instruments influenced immediately all the others. And that was very fascinating to see the direct effect of minor changes changing the whole setup. And what we also could experience, sometimes they established a click track, but not that the musicians can play right in time, because they are perfectly skilled and trained. They can play perfectly in time if they want to, but somehow introducing a click track helped them to get a certain time feeling, because Steve has a lot of time changes, not only time signature changes, but also speeding up and letting the orchestra breathe, because he wanted to include different some musical arguments in the piece, in the dramatic change of events. And then the click track was very helpful somehow to get into the flow of the next passage.
Yeah, that's closer. Thank you. Yeah, that's a poco accelerando.
Yeah, just only poco. Not too much more. You want more accelerando.
Poco. Give us one moment. Can I hear 4:12 and 4:15? Okay. I would say at 4:13, a little more of a pause
Before the bassoon.
before the bassoon. Just,
Or before.
just let there be a tiny bit of space.
Thank you. Okay.
So 384 through 386.
Yes.
Flutes, keep the double pianissimo dynamic constant through all the trills, so the notes don't get softer on the attacks. It should have a slur over the whole 3 bars, except for when you need to breathe, obviously. One more time with the click if we can.
One more with the click, okay. Yeah,
Okay,
so
okay,
same
okay.
spot.
No, stop.
Sorry, late.
Okay. No, okay, let's try this. Treat those 30-second notes as grace notes and play them faster, but before the beat. So it's
Yeah, so it's a double tempo now.
yes.
Okay, so then it changes to a double tempo.
Make it grace notes. Non arpeggiatura. That's a little too fast. Just
3 or 4 notes.
4 notes. Downbeat on the 5th note. They're just not starting together.
Yeah.
The third chapter, for me, was the most inspiring moment to learn because it was capturing a perfect performance. And as listeners, as music fans, we all can recognize when, for example, a solo was perfect, right on the spot. When we deliver something ourselves, we somehow get the impression, yes, that was somehow the best I could deliver. But in a studio setting, with a collective involved like an orchestra, so many people working and doing things at the same time, how do you not only capture a perfect moment and recognize, yes, that was exactly what I intended, but also how do you provoke and inspire the musicians to deliver right on the spot? And here we have where some recognize again how important this analytical way of listening was, that rehearsing somehow is working on details that seem hardly detectable, but if you change them, somehow you could see on Steve's face and how the musicians react. It was like, yes, we got it.
So that
Yeah, I think we have it up to 4:15. It's still not quite there.
halfway through 4:16, we start to lose the beats on the one, the anchoring, and then it tumbles over itself.
We can take from 4:14. There it is.
Can do it.
That's it. That is it. But now we need to take it from 4:14. Somebody figure it out.
Remarkable.
Very nice. Okay, so that I'll have to. We have to get a different 4:14.
Yeah. Now it's like a clockwork. Before it was like a clockwork orange.
Yeah. You want to move on now with this? Okay, let's move on.
The second example was what you usually cannot see in a studio, because all the studio scenes always seem to give the impression that there's happening so much. Very long time spans seem to include nothing. It has to do with waiting, with patience. And patience, if you're a musician yourself, that you try to focus on the moment where you have to deliver, but until then you have to somehow stay in this mode of concentration. And this happened there, and you had the difference. At some point Steve was very happy, but certain musicians were unhappy and asked for a repetition with very, very funny moments. Take a look.
So Luca?
He's not here.
No. That's true, but his twin brother is equally handsome, so I'm just going to talk to him. So we got a lot of good stuff. We want to focus in on the 419 to 435.
da ya da da. So from 428, yeah, da ya da da. No, slur the whole thing there. So da 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 ya da 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 ya da da. Very expressive. I don't know.
Yeah.
You can't write that.
No, you just sang it for us.
Nope.
Sorry, we need a clean entry. Yeah, great work.
That is so it.
Cool.
Thank you so much. You try again? What is it? What is that, Yuka?
No, no, no. Speak to yourself. Omasta puolesta vai? Siinä vai? Okay, one more time.
Okay. There's something that's complete rubbish. Yes!
Yeah.
That is it.
Yeah.
We're not touching that.
Nope.
That was it.
Beautiful.
Okay, thank you.
And our third example was the moment how to find a dramatic ending. Having perfect moments throughout the piece, but somehow bringing that to the grand finale into a somehow very good ending that everybody felt comfortable with. And even how perfection that took place all the time even could be improved so that this microscopic way of listening and working on details turned into somehow cinematoscope. Take a look.
Okay, that was
Nice.
the ending.
That was the
That
ending.
was the ending.
Nice. Yeah.
That was a perfect ending. Okay, I would like to make one small change, and we would like to get this one more time. It fell apart a little bit at 469, 470. Bar 473, percussion, beat 3, instead of 4/16 notes, play 2/8 notes.
Where?
473, beat 3, percussion 2. Go back to the 16th. You know what? No. One moment. Give us one moment. Can I hear 472?
Yep.
Like you're a rock and roll fill in there, but I'm not going to try to explain it. Okay, Juga, can you explain to the percussion 2 that I would like beats 2 and 3 to resemble what the strings are doing?
Higher or
Okay, so
what?
bar 474.
Sorry. Hey, wait. Sorry, Steve. So 474, second and third beat. Yes, but do you want them with both high and low drums, or upper or low?
Both.
Both. Okay.
And quarter note on beat 1. So bar 473 to 474 should sound like this. Diki 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 da 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 da. Make sense?
No, it's similar like the first violins.
Bar 474.
Hey,
But
first violins have a quarter note and then a triplet
yeah,
against 2 quarter notes.
yes, quarter note tied to the first quarter note of a quarter note triplet. As a matter of fact, I recognize the viola part needs a tie. Okay, 473 percussion, from 473 to 474, it should sound like this. Daka 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 da da ba 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 ba. Okay, bar 473 for the percussion. Beat 1, 16th notes. Beat 2, 16th notes. Beat 3, 2/8 notes. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Bar 474, quarter note on the downbeat. Tie the quarter note to a quarter note of a quarter note triplet,
Yes.
and then attack the next 2 quarter notes of the quarter note triplet.
All those different elements I have the pleasure of presenting to you bring me now back to the beginning. How are orchestra recordings made? What do we learn from all the details? And how do those details assemble one breathing organism of music? First of all, I guess we now understand much better how much care Steve takes with listening. He explained in the interviews how the inspiration came into his mind and how the process happened to transform this imagination into this score so that the conductor and the musicians could start to work. But getting back to the aspect of listening, listening takes much focus. Our ears tell us if this puzzle of details became one picture. So the one lesson Steve always wanted to give is listening with the combination of the abstract imagination and the experiencing the process of a collaborative creating. So the combination of what do I hear, how do I react to that, and how does this change the whole setting of the collective. The second aspect I'd like to mention is somehow bringing this focus of listening, of taking care of all the details, what we can learn from the orchestral recordings, bring this aspect of listening now and transpose it to his catalog of the rock records. You will experience, and I can guarantee you, precision and appreciating different layers of the music, because we now can learn that in the background of certain sounds there is much information involved that's somehow not on the surface, but without this background the melody, for example, wouldn't develop in the same way as our ears tell us. The third aspect somehow has to do with musicology. Don't be afraid of analytical listening and describing it. It's somehow a simple lesson in understanding the artists better. Take a listen to the rhythm in Little Green Man. Take a listen to the harmonies and the ninths, the intervals that somehow Steve loves so much in Answers, the piece from Passion and Warfare. Or listen to Kill the Guy on Alien Love Secrets, or to Voodoo and Fever on the Ultrazone. With the orchestral recordings, you will get a different listening experience to Steve's other music. The fourth aspect, to me, was the most revealing one, because it always reminds me why I started with musicology. Musical analysis can really be something like autopsy, getting into details. And one moment I remember is when, during the recording, Steve turned around, and I couldn't capture that on film because it happened spontaneously. He turned around and told me, here, in bar 436, somehow this tiny detail here on the flute holds together the whole piece. And that was a fascinating moment. A few intervals changing after a repetition in the orchestra. First it starts very silently with the flute, and then somehow it blossoms into the full orchestral sound. And he said, this is the moment where the whole piece started, and it's in the last segment of the piece, so that I somehow got a key to his explanation, a key to his understanding, and I could learn more about his musical way of thinking, that taking care of the details improves the solidity, somehow to let one idea develop into one complex, beautiful musical cosmos. And if we, with my team here in the background, maybe could explain a little bit better how Steve thinks about orchestral music and why this is really a special occasion, then I'm very grateful. And I'd like to thank you for your patience, for your curiosity, and I'd like to thank my team, especially Marcel Gauthier, for taking care of all the technical stuff here, for shooting the video, to Code Clue, to Joris, to Juka, and especially to Steve for taking time and letting us follow his musical inspiration. Thanks. Bye.